Good afternoon. Welcome to the Fine Arts Department here at the Wayne County Extension Office. I am showing you a display of the chess pieces that I've recently painted. At this point, we are down to one last piece, and I wanted to hold off on it so that I can demonstrate how I paint each of these, and wanted to show you how the rest of them look before we get started. As a review, this theme is water and lava. Water, as you can see, being on the left-hand side with the blue variations here, and lava on the right-hand side, which is what I'm getting ready to demonstrate. I'm working from three different colors today. One is a deep brown that I've mixed, and another is just straight black, and the other is a crimson red, and the last one that I will use is a metallic gold in those areas where I want it to be seen. Not much of the metallic is used, but just enough to set it off. And not only is this going to be a tutorial on how to paint sculptures and how to do wet blending, I'm tying this in with the clay bust lesson that I have done in the past. I've showed you in the past how to sculpt a head on a pedestal, like the knight pieces here. But this will be extended from that, just to show you how you can paint the busts that you create. And as a review to any of my 4-Hers out there listening, if you want to submit a clay bust into the state fair, there is a clay bust area in the state fair catalog, which is described as using self-hardening clay or firing clay. And in this case, I have used firing clay. I've fired these to stoneware, and now I'm just painting over the stoneware. So, just another look at the knight pieces there, the clay busts, and on this side we have the water busts. And I'm going to set my camera up here on my stand so that I can show you how to paint this particular one. I'm going to grab this one here too so that I can compare. We are just about ready. I need to get my light set up here real quick, so just bear with me. Okay, so I think we are just about ready. And I know that you're looking at this from a bird's eye view, but I will be picking up this piece and showing you different parts of it as I work on it. Uh, as you can see, as a review with this knot piece that I'm showing you, if I can get it in the view here, you can see the variation from the deep brown that I've mixed with the straight black, which is just it's just straight from the apple barrel craft paint container that you see. And I'm also using crimson from the same brand. And the last one that I will use is this metallic pure gold, which I have bought in the Folk Art brand. You can get that at your local craft supplier. I got this from Walmart. And I'm going to brush on a coat of the deep brown first, and it will take a couple of coats to get it solid before I start adding the other tones. So that is the color we will use first. I'm using soft bristle paint brushes, by the way, because the soft bristles are going to spread it around smoother. You don't see strokes in them as much, or streaks from the bristles with a soft bristle. Okay, so I'm just going to coat this with the brown first. The brush I'm using isn't very big, by the way. It's not a fine point, but it's still small enough to where I can do some detail work when the time comes. If you get a brush too big, you can't really do the detail work because the bristles are just too large. Always be sure that you have good lighting when you paint indoors, by the way. That's a great tip I can leave for you today. I have a lamp shining over it at the moment, which allows me to see all these hard to reach areas that I'm getting. And if you don't have good light, you can easily miss those and not realize it. Like in the main, if you're painting main. And the color, this particular tone of brown, it's very close in color to the natural tone of the stoneware, so if your lighting isn't good, the browns are so close together that you can get them uneven if you don't have good lighting. And it looks even in poor lighting, but when you have good lighting, you'll see those areas that you missed. Got the first coat down. Let's see. Yeah, I'll get one more spot here. Yeah, I have the first coat down at this point, and I just need to let it dry. I need to look over it first to make sure that I don't have any bubbles or thick areas of paint. I need to smooth those out. I missed an area underneath the chin. Okay, so I think I've got all those areas fixed. Now, I have a blow dryer on hand that I'm going to use to help speed up the drying process, and that is what I'm going to do at this point. So I'm going to go back over it. 2 coats of this color will solidify it. It'll look even. You can see how uneven it is with just 1 coat, or at least in person. You may not be able to see it as well on the camera. And this second coat won't take as long to do. And after I have the second coat on, I'm going to start working in some of the crimson in different areas. Once you've painted an area, go back over it so that you can feather around to get that paint even. Don't leave thick areas because that won't dry as quickly, and it's noticeable when it dries. You'll see raised areas that weren't intended to be there. It was just paint that was just way too thick and it dried. So okay, so we have our second coat on. Like I said, it didn't take as long. And I'm going to blow dry that real quick, and then I will show you how I work in some of the red. Okay, before I add the red, I want to show you where I'm going to put it. I'm only going to put it in certain areas, and in this case, since I'm focusing on a lava theme, it's going to be where the lava is running, and at the point where it's dripping is where I'm going to add it. As you can see in this example here, where the drips are, and also on the inside. Where the back of the neck is there. Now the eyes will also be red, but that will be the last thing that I will do. And it won't look this bright as I first put it on. There will be some layering. So I have some crimson already ready to go in a plate, just in a styrofoam plate. And I'm going to clean my brush out real quick. And I will be using some of the brown again, but the red is going to go on a little easier with a fresh, clean brush. And I'm only going to put it in those areas where the drips are at the moment. As you can see, it's uneven. It's fine. The more layers we put on it, the brighter it's going to be. Now I'm going to get some of that brown and come off to the side and then just kind of feather that into the red. That's how I blend the two together. And I'm going to be going back and forth between the brown and the red. That extra layer of brown is going to help with the blending. It needs to be wet so that I can get it to blend the way I want. Just lightly, when you're blending, you're just barely sweeping the surface. You're not bearing down really hard. The light sweep will allow you to blend the colors. Now, another thing in regard to the red, another thing that I'll comment on is we're putting down a foundation at this point, and the foundation will not be as bright red as it will be by the time the piece is finished. I will do some dry I will do some dry brushing later on top of the foundation to get that brightness I want. Again, putting red on the drips first and then letting it fade. I want some red to be on that mane as well, just because it's an area that stands out. Come back in with some brown and blend that into the red. Now I will come back and fine tune these colors with a smaller brush later on. But again, this is just part of the foundational work we're doing. Now again, not only I am putting the red on the drips, but like I just mentioned with the main a second ago, I'm also putting red on areas that are meant to stand out. So in this case, places like the jaw, it may be a little hard to see from your end, but in person you'll notice that the jaw sticks out, and those areas that pop out make the effect more eye-catching, in this case with the red. Not that it has to be really bright, but just enough to get it to stand out. Just add a little bit more to it, layer at a time. Just kind of sweep it in with your brush. Move around in circles, feather it to get it to blend. Again, this is called wet blending as a review. I did a basic demonstration of this not long ago on a wooden egg, but we're being a little more detailed with it today. You can see that jaw pop out even more at this point. I'm going to extend some of that red down here to the nose. And we'll move to this side. I really like how this side's coming out. Just going back and forth from the red to the brown. As you're sitting here watching, the night piece is the most detailed piece in the entire set. So it takes longer to get this particular piece finished, especially when sculpting it. I have more hours invested in each night piece than I do the rest of the pieces. But with that said, in regard to the night, it allows me the perfect opportunity to demonstrate how to create a clay bust, and how in this case you can apply paint to it as an additional way to finish it. feel like I'm getting pretty close to getting the foundation down in the way that I like it. I'm just making the red a little brighter in those areas where I want it to stand out more, like the drips and those particular raised areas that I want to be noticed. Pretty much anywhere where I want red to be, but those areas that stick out the most is where it needs to be at its brightest. And naturally, as lava flows, it's going to be brighter, or at its brightest, where it's at its hottest. So as it flows, you're going to see brighter colors on the areas where it's dripping. So that is the effect we're going for in this case too. I'm just giving it the once over to make sure that I have all these areas where I want them to be. I think this jaw needs a little more red. Okay, so I think we're about ready for dry brushing. So I'm going to dry this off and show you how the dry brushing is done. Okay, so when it comes to dry brushing, a couple things to remember. First of all, your brush needs to be dry, and I thought I had a dry one ready to go, but I just took one out of the water, but I'm working on drying that at this point. I'm just going to be using a soft bristle paintbrush that's a little bit bigger than the one I was using. Other people have used makeup brushes, which are round at the tips. This one's close enough, but it's soft and it's dry. That's the main thing to remember. The second thing that I'm going to be the second thing to remember is you need to brush on the areas where you want that particular color to be. So I just added red to the brown, and I'm going to dry brush some more red on the same areas that I worked from. Now you don't need very much paint on your brush when you're dry brushing. So just dab a little bit on and take a piece of paper towel and blot it like that. Yeah, I use my hand from time to time. So at this point, just barely sweep across. Those areas. Now you are going to get a little bit of it on the dark brown, but you can take some of that brown later on and then just paint over those areas. And I'll show you how that's done when the time comes. Looks like we are 50 minutes in, almost an hour, which gives you an idea of how long it takes to do each piece. There are 32 pieces in the game of chess, and each one of them went through this process. Finally, and I'm finally getting to the last one here. So it's been a long process, but I'm excited at this point since it's looking more complete. So I'm going to dry brush over that mane as well. Any area where there's texture is where this dry brushing really does some magic. You know, just barely sweeping it, like in this case, the mane. You can see how those deep areas stay dark, but the raised areas, you know, show up in that red. And from a distance, you can really see that effect. It's looking a little bit rough in certain areas right now, but I'm going to take that brown later on, and as I fine tune it, I'm just going to go over those areas and tone down some of that red where I don't want the red to show. And I will do some more wet blending later too. I'm going to go back and forth between the wet blending and the dry brushing. I want it to be really bright in this area, so I'm just adding more red there at the moment. If you're wanting to go for this molten lava effect, these three colors that I'm working from, well, four including the metallic gold, are they're very effective. The only color that I mixed was the brown. The other colors were just straight from the bottle. The crimson red is what I recommend for it, and just a basic black. And any kind of metallic gold. But for the brown, all I did was mix in some of that black with a brown nutmeg color that I have to create an umber, like a deep dark umber. Which contrasts really well with the black. We're going to add black later, and I'll show you how that's done. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the red in just a second, but I want to tone down some of these areas where I don't want the red to be quite so prominent. So I'm just going to use the same brush that I've been dry brushing the red with, and I'm just going to put a little brown on it, and I'm going to sweep in those areas where I don't want the red to be. That's how you tone down your dry brushing when you're using this method. I think I'm going to have to switch to a smaller brush because there's certain areas, like right here, the brush is just a little bit too big for it. I may be able to just do a wet brush on that. Okay, I'm going to put this brush down for a minute and switch to another one. One that's about that size. And I'm going to use some of the red again. Take just a little bit of the brown. And there's a deeper area right in here that I'm going to put black in later. I'm just going to compare the two for a minute, just to show give me an idea of what else I need to do. It's slowly getting down to the nitty-gritty. And I've got a wet paintbrush at the moment. This is not dry brushing. Wherever there are sharp lines, I'm just trying to move my brush alongside those to make the effect look more crisp. Again, using a soft bristle brush. I'm not using stiff bristle brushes at any point on these pieces, because stiff bristles can scrape the paint away too. The soft bristles are more gentle. We are almost at the point of using black, and I'm still going to be going back and forth between the red and the brown later anyway, as we fine tune it. But we're at a place to where we can start doing some of the black wet blending. Now black will add some depth, and I'm going to put a little bit of it underneath the jaw and on some of the neck, just to get the jaw and part of the head to pop out. But we need a wet slate again, so I'm going to add some black first. In those areas. And I already have some black on my palette, ready to go. I'm going to put some underneath the jaw too, right there. Now remember that a little bit of black goes a long way. You don't need much on your brush. Make sure that your slate is wet, and then just grab a touch of black and then quickly move your brush back and forth. Acrylic paint dries fast, so you have to work fast with your paintbrush to get those tones to blend. And if it dries, just add some brown around where you put the black. And then take the black again and then just blend them together. And I may come back and add some more black in this area. I'm not sure it needs it. Right now it's looking pretty good, but I'll have a better idea once that paint dries, because I want the blend to be graceful, and sometimes you can't see how graceful that blend is until the paint dries. While I'm looking in this particular area, I'll go ahead and mention that I will be using a fine point paintbrush, a really small one, to go into some of these details here, like the nose, nostrils, and the mouth, and put black inside those areas to get those features to pop out, but not quite ready for that yet. I know, like I said early on, I want to put some black down here. So I'm going to put brown on the slate. And then just work in a little bit of black. And I think I want to put some black in here as well. So what are we creating here with all these tones? If I haven't mentioned it before already, we're creating contrast. Variations of different colors side by side, blended together. So this is an example of contrast just as well as it is color. As far as the painting goes. But this is also a sculpture. So when we think of the elements of art, form would apply in this case because it's a three-dimensional object. Because it was hand sculpted, and sculptures are great examples of form. And any area that's showing movement, you know, as lava melts, there is movement there. Where it flows and where it moves is where we want that aspect of it to stand out more than those areas that are at rest. You can now start to see how that brown and black at the base is blending. There's a sharp cutout here that I'm going to add black to later with a fine brush. You know, that resembles these areas on this piece. Just for extra decoration. A little hard to see on this other one, but it's right. Well, actually, there's two spots. There's one right here and another one right there. Okay, I think I'm going to take a break from the black and start fine-tuning the red. Be sure my brush is clean. This is where the red is going to look more sharp. And I've got wet, this is not dry brushing, I've got wet paint on it. And I'm just going to be painting at the tips of those drips. And any area where there's a sharp, where you see sharp lines, in those areas where the red is needed. I'm attempting to do a time-lapse video of this from my iPad while I'm demonstrating. It's my first time doing it. So we'll see how it looks by the time it's finished. But I've got my iPad over here on another stand. From time to time, as I've cleaned my brushes out, I've had to wheel that thing around to show different sides of it. So that's why you've seen some pauses in the process here. You can see how this red is looking more tight at this point. I'm going to switch brushes and start going to using a fine point brush where it looks like this. Okay, really small brush. And I'm going to paint in those areas that are hard to get to with other brushes, along those sharp edges. I'm not doing that on soft edges as much, just on sharp. And I'll probably need to go over those areas again since it looks a little uneven, since those are areas that I'm just now getting to paint. And I think I will go ahead and start to paint the eyes. Just get a little bit on the tip. And just be easy with it. Have a gentle hand. And just kind of push the brush to the edge. Or to the edges, I should say. There's one. And this will be the second. And that will be the other one. So now the eyes are painted in. Again, they're uneven. They'll need another coat. So while those dry, we'll just look over the piece again, see if there's other areas that need the red while I've got the red paint out at the moment. It's an area I forgot there. Haven't compared it in a while, but you can see that it's getting close. I think those eyes may be dry enough at this point to put a little more red on it. Or rather, more red for those, for them. It's still a little uneven. I think they need one more coat. I think I'm going to switch to black at this point with the fine brush, or fine point, because there are areas that need it, including this little area back here. Trying to get the tip of that to be a little sharper. Whenever you're making your fine point brushes sharper, you need to pinch the ends of them and then twist. That will help get them sharp. Sometimes it takes getting your hands a little dirty to do it. And it's always good to be in the habit of doing this after you clean them out. That way, as the brushes dry, they're sharp and ready to go for the next time. Now, I did get some black on some of the red where I don't want it to be, and I'll just come back at this point with more red and cover up those areas where I didn't intend for the black to go. Check on the eyes to see how wet they are. Okay, yep, this is going to be the final coat for the red on the eyes. And we're not finished with the face. I'm going to get some more black on my brush at this point. Have the brush be just slightly wet. And I'm going to put black in those areas like the mouth, as well as the nostrils. Anywhere where there's lines, I'm putting some black there. And I'm going to come back over it with some brown to clean it up. Just a little bit underneath the eyelids. Now I'm using the brown. I'm putting brown on the raised areas, not those areas where I put the black, because I did get some black in areas I didn't want the black to be, including those raised areas, so I'm just trying to fix that. do some more fine tuning on this cheek. Since I've got some brown on it anyway. So I'm going back in to wet blend that area. And after I finish this jaw, or the cheek area here, there's a lot more fine tuning that I'm going to do to it, but we're already almost 2 hours in at this point, and you've seen the gist of what I wanted to show you. The last thing I want to show you is where I put the gold. And then once I put the gold on, I will conclude this video, and I will continue to work on it until I have it where I want it to be, to where it looks clean and crisp and precise and the way I'm going for. But at least at this point now you can see that the cheeks stand out, you know, the head and the jaw, as I've gone in to modify that particular area with the red and the brown. And now for the gold, it's not going to take very much. Squirt just a drop on my palette. And I'm going to take my fine point brush and start with the eyes. Just get a little bit of it on there. And just barely sweep the surface. And that's a little more than I want, a little too distracting, so I'm going to take some red and go back over it. And now it still looks metallic. You can still see that it's got a metallic sheen, but it's not so overpowering. That's another thing to remember when you're using gold. Gold is very loud, or any kind of metallic that you use will be that way. Sometimes you do want it to really stand out, but if you put too much of it on something like this, it can be very distracting. And I want all these details to show, so the gold needs to be really subtle. Okay, I'm going to switch brushes. And basically going to dry brush the gold on those drips that you see. And I will go back and tone it down with the red, just as I did with the eyes a second ago. But I'm only focusing on the hottest areas, or in other words, where the lava is at its hottest, which is going to be the furthest point where it drips. Now this area will need to be brighter with red, and when I conclude the video I'll finish that out. It looks a little uneven right now, but that's one of the last things I'll need to do to it. I'll put some right there. Yeah, I'm using my hand as a palette just because it's closer to me and it doesn't bother me. The plate is there and I'll use it from time to time, but if you don't mind getting a little paint on you, your hand comes in handy. No pun intended. I need a smaller brush for that. It's just for extra effect. I know that I told you a second ago that I'm primarily focusing on the areas that are at their hottest, like the drips in that case. But these other areas that are here for just extra detail, like the eyes and these little areas, you know, a little bit of gold there will help those places stand out. Okay, I think I'm about ready to put some red back in those areas just to tone some of that gold down. You'll still see the gold. It'll be transparent enough to where you'll see a sheen of it. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop there. You've seen the gist of what I tried to get across to you. Covering tips once again in wet blending, as well as how to dry brush in addition to that. And after I do the fine tuning on this, then all my pieces will be completed. Once again, I'm going to compare the two nights. And I'm going to take you back to the shelf. and put those side by side. And this will give you an idea of what the complete set will look like, minus the board. I still have to do the board. You're looking at the horses. That's what I just demonstrated. Traditionally, a knight is a horse head in the game of chess. But when I make chess sets, since I love sculpting dragons, I like to offer optional knights in dragon form. So there's a close-up look at the dragons. So if one day you're in the mood to play the game with horses, then you can do so. But you also have the dragons as an option. But these were all painted in the same way that you just saw me demonstrate. So with that said, we are 1 hour and 51 minutes in, and I still have some more work to do on that horse I was just working from. But you got to spend some time with me finishing the last piece, and I appreciate your attention today. If you have any questions going forward, you know how to find me. And I hope you have a good day. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you another time.